Hi, friends. I'm Diana Bernard. Cassandra and I are currently on a summer break. We are preparing for our season 2, and we wanted to keep the conversation going. Today, we're going to replay an episode that was close to our hearts, episode 3. So it's right at the beginning. This is a topic that we're going to come back to over and over because being from our generations, being an 80s baby, we are carrying a massive load. And in season 2, we're heavily researching and preparing to unpack very specific, heavy realities that older millennials are facing today. We're going to be tackling themes like navigating the sandwich generation. It is the emotional toll of growing children while simultaneously needing to heal our own things that happened to us when we were children. And also for many, we have aging parents. We are losing our parents, and we're recovering from a chronic hustle culture that we have now become or began to establish boundaries and act in ways that we are getting to know ourselves and learning our limits, learning to trust ourselves again. So, in this episode, we talk about widening our window of tolerance. That is how to intentionally find glimmers of joy and even peace when the world feels really chaotic. And we are also talking about radical honesty and reducing shame. And that goes into why validating our nervous system and acknowledging that things are heavy is the first step to actually feeling better. So we are looking forward to coming back really soon. And in the meantime, grab your favorite mug, settle in, enjoy this episode where we look at when we talk about how we can move from just surviving our history to actually living in spite of it. We can't wait to see you in season 2.
Hello, friends. I'm Cassandra Harris Towner.
And I'm Diana Bernard.
As licensed mental health counselors, we're unpacking the quiet, complex griefs that don't come with a funeral because you can't heal what you don't acknowledge.
Welcome to the Living Loss podcast. We're so glad you're joining our conversation as we name these losses and create a meaningful path forward together. Please subscribe and share this episode. It helps us grow this community and reach others who need to know that their grief is valid. Let's dive in.
So, in today's episode, we're unpacking this collective and cumulative grief. We're talking about the braced feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop and how we can acknowledge that life is scary while still making room for growth and joy. So, we are working on defining collective and cumulative grief at the same time because they sound really, really similar, but they're not necessarily the same thing. Even just the collective versus the cumulative can be a little bit confusing for others. So, Diana, can you tell me a little bit about what collective grief is?
Yes, so you're right. And it sounds like a tongue twister. And when you're reading it, it looks like the same word. Right? Collective and cumulative. I think about math as well. I don't know why.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So collective grief. This is the heavy weight shared by a group of people, like a generation or a nation, and it's shared trauma. The feeling of we're going through this together. We recently had that feeling during the pandemic, right? We felt like we were going through it together, but it often lacks a clear endpoint, which is how I felt. I thought, when did it end?
I don't know. Some days it still feels like there's a lot of remnants out there of it. And there is. There's a lot of emotional remnants. There's a lot of even physical remnants. I still see people from time to time wearing masks, which personally I appreciate because if you're sick, keep it to yourself. And at the same point in time, there's this underlying grief where people remember it in a way that, yes, it happened, but it's almost like a fever dream. Like,
Yeah.
did the world really shut down for that period of time? Did the United States really shut down for that period of time? It really did. And there's a lot of grief and loss involved in that, especially when you're looking at the children that were born into that time period or raised during that time period or had to leave school during that time. There's a lot of different moving parts there.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. So many layers depending on what stage of life you are in. I was thinking about the people who graduated and started looking for jobs around that time. It's hard enough when you graduate and you think that you have some kind of idea of what you're going to do or you don't. And then for no one to have an idea of how to get a job or what to do. I think that's a hard time in our lives in general to graduate and then be unemployed. But then to go through it, and I can see how circumstances like that people are recovering. It's a work in progress. It's figuring things out. It's timelines going completely upside down.
Well, it's even the things that we don't think about changing that changed. So many people went from a regular 9 to 5 job to gig work. So many people completely changed their career paths. You and I both started our master's program right then and there in the beginning of the pandemic. And there's even but there's
No,
even
no.
this collective grieving of what we lost. I have people that I know that I spoke to recently that are still aggravated, I'm going to say, about the fact that Walmart's not open 24 hours anymore. Like, that's been going on for 5, 6 years now, and it still affects them like it was today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. They're probably night owls or
It's
don't like
easier
to
to shop
shop
at
with
night.
a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah.
So how is that different from cumulative grief?
All right. So cumulative grief is grief overload. It happens when you experience multiple losses in a row without enough time to process the one before it.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's devastating when we see, and we talk a lot about non-death grief, but when you have multiple deaths of a friend, a family member, tragic deaths in the same year. You hear that a lot at the end of the year, like this year almost killed me because of this cumulative grief. And we were talking about last week about delayed grief. And if we're delaying it because it's too much, we don't know when it's going to pop back up
Mhm.
and it's going to hit another one. Also, and I'm sure we have all noticed this, when we experience a new loss, all of the past loss is like a resurrection. They all come back. So that sense or that feeling of cumulative grief, grief overload, happens more often than we think.
And what comes to mind for me is, like, how collective grief and cumulative grief run hand in hand. Because sometimes there's, like, these huge events that affect everybody, and then they just happen and happen and happen and happen. So you had mentioned earlier that we had 9/11 happen. I was a sophomore in college when that happened, and then when I graduated college, it was 2005, shortly thereafter, as I'm trying to find my own personal way through the world and into the workforce. I actually moved from New York to Florida, and the county that I moved into, 350 teachers had just been laid off. My undergrad was in art education, and you can probably guess what some of the first jobs to release were. So
Mhm.
I wasn't the only one going through that. It was collective, but it was also cumulative. And, you know, all that started to change and everything started to heal a little bit and things started to get a little bit better and the world shut down. So
Mhm.
it cumulatively comes together to be this huge collective grieving moment. If you ask my children about 9/11, they have a very different experience about it than what we had because we lived it.
Right.
So it can be a lot of very confusing entities all at once, and you're not always sure why you feel the way that you feel, why you feel constantly on edge.
Yeah. Today, we're going to make the connection between this type of grief, the collective and the cumulative, and us, 80s babies. How we're so lucky. Yeah. And before we get to that, that's going to come up next, where we're going to make that connection why millennials, or what is it called? Zennials,
Elder millennials.
elder millennials. I don't know about that one.
Look, I embrace it. I got enough gray hair to be like, no, that's about right.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit of psychoeducation here. And the concept is called the window of tolerance, and it was developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. All right. So the way this looks like is that you have these three parts, right? Inside the window. And when you're inside the window, you feel grounded, flexible, you can handle the news without spiraling. I don't know about you, but I haven't been here in a while. We outside.
We've been in the hyper-arousal state for a little bit of time now.
Yeah, tell me about the hyper-arousal.
The hyper-arousal state is a little bit different from being inside the window, where we feel like we're in that like constant fight or flight zone. Like I mentioned it earlier, like where you're constantly feeling braced for whatever's going to happen next. It's that other shoe mentality area. Like for the 80s babies, this could look like constant and chronic anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to raise my hand on that one. Amounts of panic throughout your day or throughout your week or throughout your month, and being constantly on guard. Like you're stuck in this state of high energy and hypervigilance. It's not uncommon with people that fit into this elder millennial, zennial, however you want to say it. The people who have lived through these tragedies live also in this state of mind. It takes a lot of work to get us out of that.
I really do, with all seriousness, because I think we laugh because it is you laugh or you cry, right? So we're going to cry. We're definitely going to cry some days. But I really do believe this is where we live.
Yeah.
The ceiling. It's called the ceiling, right? So we're I haven't seen that window maybe.
Not entirely certain I've ever seen the window. It also, though, makes me think of, you said the ceiling. There's also the floor, because there are some days that I'm also in the hypo-arousal state, which is the floor. And this can be the freeze zone. Like, I know I got stuff to do, but I just can't do the thing. It could look like numbness or disassociation or feeling checked out, or the need to constantly scroll through Facebook and YouTube reels and just suddenly lose 2 hours of my life. Not that I've done that. But, and just checking out from the world because it simply feels like too much just to feel everything. And I don't know about you, but I tend to swing between those two feelings, the hyper-arousal and the hypo-arousal, with very little time inside the window.
Yeah, we're going to talk about maybe a glimpse of a window later in this episode. And when you're talking about that floor, I think we have to get there. We have to just have, I don't know if you've ever like just laid on the floor, if you ever lay on a cold floor, or the end of yoga when you're just laying there. My favorite part.
Favorite part.
Right. Why? Because you have to rest. You have to sometimes. It's important to just check out, just close everything out, turn off your phone if you can, or just get off social media, allow your brain to just zone out.
And I'm thinking about this podcast and what we're doing to build the community. And honestly, I want to hear from people. If their experience is not this, if their experience isn't the hyper-arousal or hypo-arousal, I would love to hear about that and know what it is that they do if those feelings should happen to come up. If they're living inside the window, I want to hear about that. I also want to hear about the people who have had similar experiences to ourselves. But I think it would be fascinating to hear a little bit more about what it's like to be inside that window and how we manage that time.
Yeah. You can email us those stories, questions at hello@livinglosspodcast.com. All right, so here comes the 80s baby connection. We talked a little bit about this already, but because we've experienced so much cumulative trauma, our window have physically shrunk, right? We get pushed into fight or flight much faster than previous generations because our baseline for quote unquote normal has been shifted in the past 20 plus years of global instability. That's it in a nutshell, right? Like we have been, I heard somewhere it's like you're only supposed to experience one of these major things once in a lifetime. Yeah,
Well,
that doesn't exist anymore.
I'm not certain who decided that and who didn't get the memo
Yeah,
on that,
I know.
because that's not
Wishful
necessarily
thinking.
how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Even in our own lives, if you're supposed to only experience like one or two major losses or major events in your lives, I missed that bus as well. Um, it can stack up and it can become incredibly exhausting.
It is very exhausting. And when we were thinking about our timeline of trauma, there's so many things that we did not even mention, right? Like you did mention 9/11, the recession. Did you mentioned the recession, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that you didn't experience, but I do want you to talk about it, was and I'm living in New York. I was born and raised there, and I had my first child in 2012, in the beginning of the year. And at the end of that year, in October 2012, we had a hurricane in New York called Hurricane Sandy. And that was a wild year. First of all, New Yorkers, we don't really know about hurricanes, and it did damage. It did
Hmm.
quite some damage. I worked at a psychiatric hospital in Staten Island, and we had to shuttle to Queens. We had to take all of our patients, our clients to Queens to live there while they were fixing up our hospital.
Wow.
It was a scary time, and you can imagine being a first-time mom, struggling with leaving the baby, then having to commute on the FDR. I don't know if you know the FDR, but
I'm familiar.
yeah.
It's not a great time.
No, it's not a great time. And was it the Belt Parkway? Either way, they're both not fun. But that was one that was specific to me. And then to see, that was my first time seeing the devastation of a hurricane. There were many deaths, and Staten Island being small, we knew each other. People knew each other. It was somebody's dad. And even now, as I'm talking about it, I specifically remember the hospital that I worked at is right near the beach. Like you can walk to the beach from there. And there was a car that was left there and abandoned. Oh, it's like to even think about this is like really hard for me still. It was a mom who was escaping with her two little boys, and the water took them. The
Oh,
water took them away and she couldn't get them, and it was very dark, and the two little boys passed. And that car was there for a while, and I have a friend that she worked in the parks department, and she used to come to the hospital to see the kids and bring the animals sometimes, and she has kids as well. She's a mom, and she wrote a note to the mom and left it with a flower on there, just in case. So, you know, there's these moments that y and we're gonna talk more about it later, is that that was the best year of my life. I had my first baby, and it was also a really difficult one. And talking about collective grief, right? Oh, cumulative. Cumulative
Mhm.
grief. See, I even get it confused. That's when they compound, right?
Mhm.
It was the first time I've ever experienced a mass shooting, especially at a school. So that year was the Sandy Hook Elementary school shooting.
And I lived in Florida during that time. Sandy Hook was 2000 and what year was that,
12. I
It
believe it
was
was 2012.
2012, that's what I thought.
Mhm.
And having lived in Florida during that time, everybody was in, like, a complete state of shock, and I think are still in a complete state of shock. There's since been documentaries and different things that have come out giving more information about it. However, like you had mentioned earlier, I had my first daughter in 2011, and the terror that you feel about just sending your child to school and entrusting them in the care of someone else, I can think would also be considered collective grief because as a parent, I can't imagine what that must have been like for them. And almost every day I think about it because it can happen at any point in time. So it's definitely cumulative that stays with you and continues to travel with you even beyond the time period of when it happens and when it occurs.
Mhm. So when we're talking about us being 80s babies and millennials, all of this that we are talking about in the early 2000s, 2012, these are things that those feelings are the ones that we're still having today. Exactly the same. What are you feeling, Cassandra?
A little overwhelmed right now.
Mhm.
It's interesting that living in like the state of waiting for the other shoe to drop, I don't often stop to think about the things that have gotten me to that point. Um, when I feel like I'm living in this consistent fight or fly, only when I have a mirror held up that reminds me of exactly how I got to this point,
Mhm.
do I really give myself a chance to process it.
Yeah.
And so, like we were just saying, even sending my children to school on a daily basis, I am conscious that I am entrusting their safety to someone else. And sometimes it's not enough. Most of the time, in my experience, it has been, but that doesn't always mean that it always will be. And so
Mhm.
we had talked about anticipatory grief in the past, and it's not so much as dwelling on the negative or the what could happen. It's just being aware that things are outside of my control and having grief about that, about the lack of control that I have, because the only true control I have is my reaction, and that is it. Everything else is outside of it.
Mhm.
And that in and of itself can be heavy. So if
Mhm.
you take the cumulative grief and add it to everything else that's going on, even today, like, in
As
the
we're
world that
talking
we
about
live
it.
in
Mhm.
today,
Mhm.
there's so many different moving parts at all times, and so much of it is outside of my control. So how do I keep these people that I brought into this world safe? How do I keep them happy? How do I keep them healthy? How do I keep them from having to live through the repercussions of my cumulative grief?
Mm. Yeah. I think that all of this is just all too familiar. I think we haven't talked about 9/11 or 2008 recession or all of these things, 2012. I hadn't spoken about it in a long time, and I felt the same, and I can tell we were both feeling a
Mhm.
bit of a flooding of emotions at the same time, difficult to talk about. And when we think about our kids, if we stay there thinking about it, I think about it quickly and then I stop.
Yep.
I'll think about it for a moment and then I have to let it go, right?
Else it'll spiral.
Because we have to support our families, we have to work, and it's also healthy for them as well to live. I would always think about when I was a younger teenager, people would say, talk about the innocence of a child, and we want to maintain their innocence, don't let them know certain things. And I really didn't understand it until fast forward becoming a mom, how short their childhood is
Mhm.
and how there will be time for them to experience this heavy grief because it is our world. We live in a broken world, right? And how to preserve that while they're in school doing drills.
So it becomes almost commonplace to them. And unless I sit and talk to them and explain the importance of why they're doing these things, it doesn't occur to them that's anything more than when we were growing up, well, at least when I was growing up, we had a lot of stop, drop, and rolls. I have
Mhm.
never once been on fire in my life. However, I know that if I were to, I would stop, drop, and roll. I've also never been stuck in quicksand. However, I know that because of how I was trained and how I was raised, if I should ever find myself in quicksand, to try to float and don't struggle. These are things that I just took for granted that could potentially happen in my life, and they were preparing me for it.
Yeah, that's the balance, right? That we want to not protect our kids so much that they don't know how to live in the world and teaching them about the world. It, it is it is a balance. It is tricky, and we you have 3 kids, I have 3 kids, and we all know all of our children are so different. So the way I speak to one about it, I have to speak differently to the other. They're in different personalities, different ages. So what we're doing, parenting, it's out of this world difficult in this world that we live in.
And then there's the added bonus to at least one of my children is neurospicy. She is incredibly neurodivergent. So
Mhm.
her reactions to grief, her reactions to things that are happening around her are different from how a neurotypical child, which I have neurotypical children as well, would respond. One feels the grief deeply, while the other one feels it at a more surface level. And so learning how to navigate that and be consistently supportive of both of them and what it is that they need. I'm speaking of my 2 older children because my youngest one
Mhm.
is 4 and she's just
Mhm.
4. So she doesn't quite
Yeah.
process all of these things yet, but the 2
Mhm.
oldest, they have definitely different ways of looking at the world.
Mhm. Yeah. So, Cassandra, we had a feeling that this was gonna be a two-parter,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's needed. I also jotted down neuro grief because that's its own episode
It's
right
its
there.
whole topic. It's its whole, like, week long.
Mhm. All right. So this is officially part 1, and we're gonna be back with part 2, where we're going to talk about
The timeline of trauma, the why we're tired, why all these things happen. I think I kinda gave away a little bit of a spoiler, like, early on and talked about the 9/11 and 2008 recession and COVID, and we've touched on Sandy Hook, and we've touched on different things. But when you see it all laid out and you actually realize what we've lived through and what we've seen and what hasn't even happened yet
Mhm.
that's coming down the pipeline, there's a reason why we're tired.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. We're going to talk about that timeline briefly, and then we're going to go on to radical honesty. What is the difference? Truth over positivity, right? We're going to talk about reducing shame and then the shift that we have to make in order to live fully, live good lives, is surviving, going from surviving to living. And that's going to be in our next episode.
And I'm
And
excited for that last part, the surviving to living. Like, even though all of these things happen and we're all living with this collective and cumulative grief, there are really good, joyful moments that I can pick out in every single day if I try hard enough. I don't always remember to
absolutely.
try, but I try to try.
You try to try, and that's all we can do. As we wrap up today's conversation, we're moving on to our favorite part of the show, living loss lessons. This is where we bridge everything we've talked about with one tangible takeaway you can use right now.
These lessons aren't necessarily about fixing the pain, but finding a way to carry it. Sometimes it's a tool to practice, and other times it's reflecting on the meaning that you built from a loss you've never asked for. It is the strength that you've gained even in the midst of all of the hard stuff. My lesson today could be about even the duality of experience. I can be heartbroken by the things that I'm afraid of, or the things that have happened, or the things that could potentially happen. But I can still crack a joke with my kids, and we can have a ridiculous laughing fit over something nonsensical.
Mm-hmm.
And the laughter doesn't necessarily betray the grief. It's how we survive it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think for me, today's lesson is about that resilience, that meaningful resilience where you actually said it right before here. I'm not biting off of you, but it is a strength. It's really the resilience, the strength that we gained through these decades, right, of uncertainty. I used to say that a lot during COVID, the uncertainty. And one day I realized we have lived in uncertainty
Yeah.
before COVID, right? So you wouldn't choose the hard loss. I don't think I would ever choose the hard loss. I think I could learn lessons without hard losses, right? But we can honor the version of ourselves that grew through it. And that also inspires me to grow through it today.
Absolutely, 100%.
Thank you so much for being a part of our circle today. Remember, by sharing this episode, you are helping us reach someone else who is carrying their loss in silence. Let's keep growing this community together. Subscribe, share, and know that your story matters. I'll see you in part 2.
We'll see you then.